Order. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wants the House to express its confidence in the national government. Well, we don't. The plan outlined by the Prime Minister for 2014 brought to mind the word Hoover. Not the Great Water Dam in the United States, not the first FBI boss in the United States, but the vacuum cleaner. You know why? Because it sucks. John Key has spent too long running around after the movie moguls. He's in his own fantasy land. His speech had the most confused start of any speech that I have ever heard in this House by a party leader. The most confused start that I've ever heard. And then the anxiety when he looked to Jerry for help. His speech should have been an honest and objective statement of the conditions facing the country, the challenges ahead, and the solutions the government has to offer, all the big things that matter to ordinary people. Instead, it was pure spin and manipulation and deceit and incorrect statements. New Zealand Prime Ministers of the past would have been embarrassed to have spouted such dribble. I think that a leadership spill in the National Party is not long away. And Jerry's smiling because he may be able to get on the right side and perhaps prolong his already far too long career. But I know that it's going on. My inside information tells me that. National is a government of non-achievers with a woeful record of failure. It always puts the interest of foreign big business ahead of ordinary New Zealanders. It keeps selling valuable state assets in a process that can only be characterised as economic madness. Here are some of the many examples of economic failure. 150,000 New Zealanders are unemployed, while immigrant work visas and permanent residencies are sold like expensive bus tickets. That member saw Campbell live last night. What's again tonight? All over the country it's going on. And the member from Hamilton, Mr. Bennett, thinks it's a laughing matter. It's not. It's an abomination to a first world country and first world laws. There is a housing crisis, but the government refuses to acknowledge that migrant numbers and overseas speculators are creating havoc and cheating Kiwis out of a decent home. There is not one country in Asia that will tolerate such a policy. They can't find one politician in Asia that would support such a policy. So why are they doing it to their own people? Nothing has been done to address the massive overseas debt. And here's what's worse. The Prime Minister didn't admit it, but it's all in the documentation. Here's what's worse. The massive overseas debt is not coming down, it's going up. That's why he uses 2020 figures, 2021. Look, he'll be gone long time before that. In fact, there won't be one member there left. Possibly we will be, for obvious reasons. But there won't be one member there left. And they're using figures that they first started to use in 2008, 12 years away, and now they're still talking about 2020 like we're going to hold on till then. I don't think so. It's still rising, and the exchanging rate is crippling exporters and manufacturers, and again, the government refuses to act. It is paralysed. Worse still, it contemplates an official cash rise shortly, which will boot up mortgage rates, and then what will happen as well? It will kick up the exchange rate even further. Here it is today, Mr. English, trying to show that he's in control. He says he's concerned about the high exchange rate, and that was a concern for the economy. Whoop-de-doo. We've got a finance minister. The penny's finally dropped. He's been here since far too long. He's been the finance minister for far too long. And you've got people saying that our currency with Australia will possibly reach parity. It's doing enormous damage to an export-dependent nation. And what does he say? Well, so it's a bit of a concern, unquote. Oh, and this is what he also said, though. He said this, which is an absolute belies what the Prime Minister was saying. Quotes, I think it's too high, yes. And I think the Australian economy is a bit stronger relative to ours. Relative to ours, it's a concession. And he says that indicates that, all in the one quote. So in the House and out in front of the National Party's cannon fodder, he persuades them to say one thing, but privately he has to admit that things are seriously going wrong with our high currency. Yeah, well, that's what a week in Davos does. Mind you, half that backbench over there don't know where Davos is. They think it's on the west coast, between Hokitika and Greymouth. Worse still, as I say, they contemplate the official cash rate going up. Up will go the dollar even further. And then they will say, well, that's a sign of a healthy economy. Unbelievable, the kind of economic drivel that they get people like Mr. Hayes and Mr. Bennett to keep on repeating. Now, I know those two gentlemen. Privately, they are alarmed. They know in their heart that that threatens their election prospects. Now, I know Mr. Hayes is smart. He's jumping ship now. He's getting out now. He's getting pushed and he's jumping now because he's wise. He doesn't want to be standing around with the mayhem and debris of chaos post-election night 2014 whenever they fly the white flag. Mr. Hayes is an experienced man. He knows he can smell danger. Now, Mr. Bennett, pay attention. He can help you. Let's look specifically at the economy. No effort will be spared by the National Party to pump up the feel-good factor in advance of the 2014 election. Mr. Spray and walk away thinks he can pull it off one more time. But I've got bad news for him. He can't. He can't. All the storm clouds are ascending now. Within the National Party ranks, they're looking already now for an alternative leader. Oh, yes, they are. Just because Hekia Parada is not part of the cabal doesn't mean it's not going on. In fact, I think Hekia will be the first tragedy when it takes place. There'll be lots of talk of an economy firing on all cylinders, the rock star economy that still can't match New Caledonia, by the way. They still can't match New Caledonia going at 3.5 year after year. They've had stagnated, bottleneck, corked-up growth. They get it for a temporary one-year term, and they start talking the rock star economy. What a joke. No effort will be made to dispel or challenge the spin that New Zealand is a rock star, a superstar economy. Well, look at all the fundamentals. It ain't true. A responsible government would have immediately corrected this sort of false and misleading claptrap. Let me sound a warning about this rock star economy. Now, it's only a suggestion, Jerry, but don't forget who's making it. Treasury has never won a Grammy Award for accuracy of its forecast. It has never won. Well, actually, they wrote it themselves. Thanks for asking the question. I couldn't have done better myself for timing. It's here, and it says this. This is from the November last 5 months ended 30th November. The operating balance before gains and losses, the OBGAL, was in deficit by 2.3 billion, which was around 400 million more than expected, mainly due to lower core Crown tax revenue. Who wrote that? Why? It's from the government itself. Financial statements of the government of New Zealand for the 5 months ended 30 November 2013. You see, an $86 million surplus is cigarette paper thin, and they're getting there because they're suspending spending, like, for example, in overseas aid, where they spent $92 million last year. Like, for example, suspending certain roading projects. Just hold them back. We'll get a surplus any which way we can. Like, we'll hold back some Waitangi settlements. We won't pay out with these victims from the Vietnam War. We just won't do anything like that there, and we'll think we'll con our way through it. And I have to tell those members, it's all been tried before and it always fails. Don't let it happen again. Only a few days ago, as I say ago, they forecast that this so-called deficit wasn't going to be what they thought it would be. National aided and abetted by its pet intellectuals. National aided and abetted by its pet intellectuals, and yes, its puppets, Bank economists, money traders and corporate cheerleaders will put a positive spin on every bit of economic news, even when it's bad. The facts are staring us in the face, Mr. Speaker. Our manufacturers and exporters will get no help with an overvalued dollar. Building has said today that about the Aussie dollar itself. It's going up by the day. It'll keep going up, as I said, if interest rates are increased. But they can't care less about every manufacturer, whether they closed or moved offshore. In the halcyon days of our great country, when National was a good party and knew what it was doing and had practical men of experience, we used to rock on at 4.5% per year, and the manufacturing was 33% of our economy, the GDP. Now it's 13% and falling. And they have no plan, because manufacturing means offshore exports and it means jobs, and they haven't got a plan. Theirs is hands off, let the free market work it out. Now, I know the apologist from Epsom thinks that that's a great policy. I mean, he also thinks pulling down your hoardings when you're campaigning. Pulling down your own hoardings. Not after election night, which the law requires, or election eve. No, pull them down during the election campaign itself. Oh, really? Let me tell that member that I've won electorates that no one else could win.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like we won all the Maori seats once. Nobody else will be able to do that.
No.
All of them. Well, what happened was they got duped by their National Party colleagues, failed to show the loyalty, and that's why the National Party now is in trouble, because the Maori Party that they put on, I know, Mr. Key made a speech last week, you recall, and all of a sudden he says, oh, we'll be happy to talk to New Zealand first. It's a bit like, you know, that famous quote from Jesse Jackson. Seems like Santa Claus is running into heavy weather. Decides now he'll call upon Rudolph. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Mr. Speaker, there is no basis for this national government to boast about its economic record. Export prices for dairy produce have been at record levels. New Zealand has been the beneficiary of the best terms of trade of 40 years. There's nothing great or glorious about 150,000 New Zealanders not being able to get a job. What's so brilliant about creating a speculative housing bubble for foreign speculators in Auckland? Is this part of some brilliant economic plan known only to the inner circle, or what they have politely termed the kitchen cabinet? You see that phrase? The kitchen cabinet. Well, I know some have spent too much time in the kitchen, but they don't make a good... or the product of the kitchen, but they're not a kitchen cabinet. As I said, New Zealand's external balance sheet is in an awful state. Dollars going up, and over the past 5 years, National has failed totally to diversify our economic base. We are now even more vulnerable to what is known as a black swan or unforeseen event or shock. That's where we sit today, and wise people have said it. Nick Smith says, what will I do about it? Well, let me tell you. We have an economy based or characterised by one dominant export product, milk powder. One dominant export company, Fonterra. One dominant export market, China. And one dominant import, people, immigration. That is not a plan that a party calling itself national, which should evince putting its people first, should ever be proud of. The stark, ugly truth is that New Zealand is nowhere near paying its way in the world, Mr. Bennett. And it's clear that this government is clueless as to how to address that. Young New Zealanders have been betrayed by this government. Their hopes of home ownership have snatched away. Barely any young couple can save at the speed of soaring house price inflation. And Mr. Bennett, you can't either. Save that fast. No member over there can save that fast. Oh, maybe Mr. Key can, but of course that's Merrill Lynch. But the rest can't. None of those members that can save that fast to match housing inflation. They struggle under the burden of student debt, and their prospects of a decent, secure and well-paying job have trashed by wholesale immigration policies. Immigration is the most thriving and corrupt industry in New Zealand today. It's not a laughing matter. It's all laid out there, and you'll hear a lot more as these few months in the soon to come unfold. Incredibly, over 150,000 migrant work visas were issued in the year to June 2013. 150,000. Today the Prime Minister announced more work visas. And the whole process, he said, of issuing visas is going to be sped up. Apply online. Get a visa online. Come to New Zealand and take a Kiwi's job. This is lunacy. And it's going to be stopped. Most certainly it's going to be stopped. And just a point the Prime Minister just claimed in the House this afternoon, he said the Hobbit movies created 5,500 jobs. That's what he said. They know over there that that statement is bull dust. Oh, no? Well, this is direct from the Prime Minister's office, senior advisor. It says this. The PM was asking yesterday for the total number of people who will work on both Hobbit movies. The context, if he's asked about Labor's industrial relations policy and how it might impact on the New Zealand film industry, he can say something like, quotes, about 3,000 people will work on the Hobbit movies. If that policy had been in place, then all those people might never got a job. So it's 3,000 by guess here. Now it's 5,500, but he's not going to get away with that sort of stuff in this campaign. Oh, no, sirree. We'll be waiting there. Every time he tells a porky, whoppo, exposure. Now, he goes on to say this. Would it be possible to get an estimated number? Just to the nearest 5 or 100 or 1,000 would be fine. Straight out of the senior advisor, office of the Prime Minister, and he gets up to the House and tells people something else. Misleading the House again. The government has no idea of who is or what is coming into the country. Why should New Zealanders give up their jobs to immigrants? The government is not loyal to the people of this country. Sure, it's a government for the people. Sure, Nationals are government for the people of China, India, anywhere but New Zealand. The winter is going to be tough. Jobs will be hard to get. Power bills are going through the roof. And as for the statement about increasing competition in the electricity industry, well, that was pure garbage. We all know we've got a price-fixing cartel operating here. Domestic consumers pay up to 3 times more for their power than big companies. And many small businesses and domestic consumers are being ripped off. We all know it. It's an exercise in deception, as is the broadband rollout. A Southern Cross conglomerate of Telecom and Chorus are exploiting New Zealanders and the government and the taxpayers because the government is paying them more than twice what it's worth, over $1 billion. Somehow the government's trying to put across that it's doing consumers a favour when they're actually being ripped off, just like the plan for the police. It's all about glib words. You know what they said today? The government is going to reduce the rate of crime by 15%, the rate of violent crime by 20%, and the rate of youth crime by 25%. What a brazen abuse of figures and statistics. It sounds something like the police files out of North Korea and Pyongyang. It doesn't sound like a first world country. I mean, has the government told offenders how much to reduce their offending? Who's negotiating with the criminal community over these statistics? And it's an absolute fact. If you don't have sufficient law enforcement resources, then you won't have the capacity to fight crime, and much crime will go unreported. Now, we know that on that matter, New Zealand First is the only party with a great record. Last time we had the power, we got 1,000 extra frontline police, just like that. And now they run around the place talking about their police resources. They're even claiming that they brought in free meds in front of 6-year-olds. No, Mr. Key's claiming that boldly out on the public stage. Thank heavens people remember. 2 to go, 1 to go. Wonderful. That'll be enough to finish off this party. That's this figure. What we heard today, if you look at the last, this penultimate page, is a statement about taking steps this year to introduce a national match-fixing policy. That's what we heard today. National's match-fixing policy for the election. If you can't win the game, cheat. Fix it. Well, we are on red alert and ready to hand out a card. Now, we can't say it'll be a red card. We can't say it'll be a green card. We can't say it'll be a yellow card. But we most definitely can say it'll be a white card. As soon as they fly, it'll be a white and black card. As soon as they will, fly the white flag. One last statement. Remember what Mr. Key said about Remember what Mr Key said about the SIS raid last year? He said he didn't know about it. We will prove in this House that he did.
The Honourable Tariana